20 months.
The study's authors said the extent to which toxic air damages people's health was quite a shock. They said children are taking the biggest hit, especially in South Asia, where those born today could see their lives cut short by 30 months. The dirty air comes mainly from traffic and industry, and in some countries from burning fuels for cooking indoors. Pollution leads to heart and respiratory diseases and makes chronic illnesses much worse.
BBC correspondent Simon Ponsford. U.S. pet owners are increasingly feeding fresh food to their dogs and cats. Online companies are delivering pre-portioned meals of meat and vegetables or frozen raw meat this spring. Petco will be opening a kitchen in New York. It expects like 2,000 pounds of fresh pet food every day. Important stories at townhall.com. I'm John Scott.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hi, and welcome to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor. I'm your host today, along with our co-host, Leland Faegre, and on Skype from Seattle, Jennifer Terhune Green. And spring is here. It's been, how was the drive down from Tahoe?
Oh my gosh, dry streets. Warmed up about 15 degrees from lake level down to the valley floor. It was really a gorgeous drive, yeah. We had some beautiful spring weather despite that little episode of snow yesterday, but it's really beautiful. Yeah.
So spring is in the air, and so is the crisis at the border.
Which phase of the crisis are we in?
I know. It just keeps multiplying. And
1,000 overnight were apprehended.
1,000?
Yeah, we're talking about cities now.
Uh-huh.
Not enclaves, not suburbs. These are cities of population that are crossing that border.
Yeah, San Pedro de Sula is the origin point, one of the most violent cities in the world in recent years, and I don't know how big that city is, but they're talking about the next caravan is going to be 20,000.
Yeah, the sponsored caravan that Mexico gives lip service to stopping and gives a green light, in fact, to transport themselves through the country to us, which is part of that grand transnational design that elites won't talk about, but there is such a plan to create a North American Union. It's the European style or European model that exists today that is falling apart over there, so naturally they want to implement the same scheme here.
Yes, and it is falling apart over there. The EU is under constant pressure, and they are looking now to China to rescue them.
They will look for any sponsor to try to save that grand design of their new world order, and whoever will step up, they will embrace. And the participants, notwithstanding, I mean, these are the elitist subordinates, whether they are heads of committees, international non-governmental agencies, anything that promotes that scheme. Climate alarmists use these kinds of things to promote that grand supranational order.
And so on the other hand, we have the influence of NATO. The Secretary General of NATO is visiting Trump, and
another transnational entity.
Another one. And originally it was founded not by America, as many people think, but by Britain and Canada through the Chatham House and the...
In those days it wasn't called Chatham House. It was the Royal Institute of International Affairs, but the homogenization of the groups around the world are all thinking similarly about this grand design, and one of those was NATO initially, one of the earliest of transnational entanglement, which the Founding Fathers, of course, warned us about.
Yes, and the Chatham House and also the Rhodes and the Fabian Society.
Yeah, those were the original or the originalists of what has now been morphed into the Chatham House.
And they also sponsored Justin Pierre Trudeau to get the prime ministership. He's an internationalist.
And David Cameron and John Major, and these are the impresarios of their grand national order that are
The usual suspects.
that they pass off as nationalist leaders, but in fact are internationalist leaders or progeny that they seek to use to create this world government.
And so, as we are saying, in Europe, they're under threat right now, and Italy has the first country to sign a formal memorandum of intent to open themselves to China and its predatory lending practices, is what we call it, in order to bring Chinese trade to their country. Of course, Italy was the first country, a Western country, to open up trade routes to China with Marco Polo, of a legend. But now,
Why do I suddenly feel like macaroni or spaghetti?
But Italy is a basket case, and they're hoping that the infusion of trade will help them to restore some sense of stability. But they are also the country that blocked the EU from recognizing Random Guido. So they vetoed that, and the EU officially still recognizes Maduro, although different countries within the EU have recognized Random Guido.
Random Guido. Yeah. Or is it Guido?
Yeah, Guido.
Well, the pasta moment passed, but it is an extraordinary thing we're watching here, because there is a despotism about what we're witnessing, whether it's the border or whether it's Europe, but it looks like the grand design of world order is falling apart, and they really don't know how to triage this trend, whether it's Trump or who are we talking about earlier in, even in Turkey, their inclination to move away from NATO seems to be a very real part of that matrix of issues there.
Yeah, and Tulsi Gabbard had a first tweet that I kind of questioned about foreign policy, in which she said that we should stop the F-35s going to Turkey because of NATO. And I was wondering, where did that come from? But if Turkey officially pulls out of NATO and joins the Russia-China axis and Iran, that would definitely be a blow to the New World Order. I mean,
you would seem to be, and yet I'm sure that they have these contingent understandings of trends and how they would deal with them should they develop. So they won't let it go anymore than the Democrats will let go of Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Yeah.
I agree that I think that they will definitely keep working, but I am kind of heartened that like the European Union has fallen apart relatively quickly. I mean, I remember when they first started it wasn't that long ago, and as far as the history of nations go, and it was supposedly the new way the world was going to be, and this enlightened new thing, and the New World Order was like right there. And it's interesting to me that it has fallen apart this quickly.
And our commercial break is right there, Jennifer, so hold that thought. We'll get back to you in a minute.
Hi there, Leroy Marshall here to welcome you to our new world-famous Marshall Mint.
To find out what's hot and happening, join Lady J for Smooth Jazz Tune-Up.
Join me Saturdays, 10 to noon, here on America Matters.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
My name is Brendan Trainor. I'm your host, along with Leland Faegre and Jennifer Terhune Green on Skype from Seattle. And we were talking about the rapid decline of the EU, at least as we can see it right now. And Jennifer, you were saying that it's amazing how fast these things implode. But, the Soviet Union imploded rather dramatically. That was an internationalist agenda there. And
Absolutely. Yes.
And now there is among those in the who are on the alternate websites and that believe in non-intervention, and some of them are saying that don't worry about Trump pointing people like Elliot Abrams and John Bolton because he did it so they will implode. He did it to show that their way of operation really doesn't work.
I do think there's something to that, actually. He does put people in place to see if they can perform. So it may be something like that. It's hard to figure out how Bolton got anywhere close to Trump. I can't explain it much any other way. So we'll wait and see how this thing plays out. I mean, and he has made a fool of himself. I mean, China just dropped in some material into Venezuela today. Did you hear that?
I did, yes. And
who's next?
Yeah,
Erdogan?
Well, it's a possibility. I mean, Erdogan recognizes Maduro. Now, Erdogan, we were talking about briefly before the break, and Turkey is a major player. I heard General Jack Keane of the Institute for the Study of War.
And a former member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yes, he was on the cable news again yesterday, and he was stressing that Turkey is a very big deal. And if Turkey leaves the EU, well, not the EU so much as the NATO orbit, that would be a major, major blow. And I don't think that pulling Ukraine in, if they can, and they can't under the current situation because they're not allowed to recognize a member that has territorial problems, and Crimea and the Donbass rebellion are territorial problems.
Yeah, but Montenegro's in there now, so we don't have anything to worry about.
If anybody attacks us, Montenegro will send in the troops.
Imagine going to war for Montenegro, honestly.
I know. That's Pat Buchanan's worst nightmare.
Yeah, and mine too.
Yeah. So, the situation is very fluid in England. Everybody is jockeying for position. Macron is still under attack by the Les Gilets jaunes. And
were they out last weekend? Because I didn't see any coverage.
You're not going to see coverage, but they said they were going to be out. Now, they had a smatter of violence. They had some people burning property.
This past Saturday?
No, I think it was the weekend before. Yeah. And there have also been some accusations of anti-Semitism, but you got to remember that they are a loose-knit. They have no leaders. They're like Occupy New York. There's nobody that's really a leader or an organization behind them.
Nobody we can see anyway.
Yeah, so people are allowed to jump in and do their thing, even if it's not a very nice thing on occasion. But they're still protesting.
Destruction of property,
Yeah, Macron had his 30 days of conversation. I love it when the left says we have to have a national conversation.
It's like a timeout for a child.
Yeah. Go to your corner, put on the hat, and don't speak for an hour or so. But anyway, yeah, the conversation is always being led by the statists, and they had their 30 days, and nothing got resolved, and so they're back to the streets and demonstrating. And it's amazing to think that France is such a wealthy nation, and all these people are living definitely middle-class people. Many of them health workers. Mm-hmm. Many of them are nurses and doctors under the French public health system,
socialist healthcare.
Yeah, which is supposed to be one of the best in Europe, and they're complaining that they can't live on the salaries.
Well, we know that the French healthcare system is one of the best anywhere because that's where Mick Jagger's going to come for his heart valve surgery.
Yeah, okay.
No, he's coming to New York.
Oh, okay.
Because he knows where the best healthcare is.
All of these systems are very good for if you have a broken bone or you out skiing or vacationing and something happens to you, and then you go into the clinic and you don't have to pay anything for them to set your bone.
Strep throat.
Yeah, strep throat, things like that. All of these things are taken care of very well, but when it comes to complicated surgery, you know where they're going.
Yep.
Yeah. Cleveland has been called the knee replacement capital of Canada.
I don't know where you get these, but they're damn good. But that's all I can tell you. Cleveland, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I got a knee replacement. I didn't get it there. Maybe that's where I should have gone.
Yeah. So, So as we continue down this road, the Democrats are saying, at least they're calling attention to the political situation, and Trump wants to end all foreign aid, and they're screaming about that because of all these programs that it's supposedly going to kick in the next year.
Make the situation much worse.
Yes, that probably would. Yeah. And all this talk about building a wall and then not being able to build it, of course, that's encouraging the migrants to come.
They know damn well they better go now or never.
Yeah. Ay, caramba, del presidente, he built the wall. We must go back.
Now or never.
Yeah.
Where's the kids? Where's the kids?
So the system has got all the false incentives built into it, and so we still expect the federal government to fix it, and which is amazing to me, but that's the way things happen, don't
Right.
they?
And I liked the points you made in your email, Brendan, about how we expect the government to fix the situation that the government has created. We always are expecting the government to come in and fix it. And then we're surprised when somehow they make it worse. And nobody's, in the national conversation, we're not talking about ending the incentives. That's not being discussed really at all.
Right. No, it's never part of the discussion at all. And of course, that really is the cure for the disease. If there was no, and I'm not talking about remittances here or transfer payments. I'm talking about public schools. I'm talking about the healthcare system. That's really the magnet that draws them in here. And of course, nobody's being educated in the public schools, so all of their children are going to grow up ignorant, and it just compounds the problem. I mean, we're in a super difficult situation down there on the border. This is really serious stuff. And of course, this borderless hemisphere, which Hillary has described in a speech in Brazil back in 2016, is the North American Union design that we talked about in the first segment of the show. If they have a borderless hemisphere, then they can begin to construct this grand regional relationship between Canada, the United States, and Mexico with a regional parliament, a regional currency, and everything that you see out of Europe, which is the model for what they want to do here.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense that and all the trends, if you study below what you see on the evening news, would indicate that has been the plan. And it's a long-running plan. It goes back to Cecil Rhodes and Winston Churchill and many other people that envisioned an Anglo-Saxon empire. And then, of course, after World War II, it became the Judeo-Christian Anglo-Saxon Jewish empire.
Yeah, as many adherents as they can bring into the fold benefits that grand design. But if past is prologue, and apparently it is, what we're seeing now with this recent trend, I mean, there were meetings during the George W. Bush years. I think one of them was in Banff, Canada, where all of the parliamentary heads and figurehead states of the grand North American Union design actually met and discussed these issues as we're discussing them now. I mean, it wasn't given the significance or the weight of understanding in the discourse as far as the American people are concerned, because the meetings were broadcast. I mean, there was media attention to them, but just not enough, not just in time, but in terms of the significance of what they were actually talking about. Well, they were talking about the subject in the way we're talking about it here, but you would never know that by listening to CNN or Fox News.
Of course not. No, they're all part of it. Rupert Murdoch is, despite the fact that he owns Fox News, you can't think of him any way other than an internationalist.
Definitely.
Yeah. And his show Strike Back is back on the air, although Spectrum is no longer has made Cinemax a premier. But I'm getting my my Amazon Fire thing going, and I can see Strike Back on that. But that is, of course, MI6 intelligence section 20 that goes around the world solving all these international problems for the crown, for good Queen Elizabeth.
I've never seen the show, but that fits the what the design is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And so we have about a minute left here before the end of this break, but I just wanted to say that nobody is talking about the real structural issues, that foreign aid is not going to help, whether you send it or not.
You mean like Jussie Smollett?
Well, no, I'm talking about this countries in Central America now. Yeah, okay, that's that locus of imperialism. But ending the war on drugs, that would obviously solve the problem instead of doubling down on interdiction, which hasn't worked for 100 years. And then leaving these countries alone to choose their elected officials, even if they're from the left and they're talking about land reform or nationalization of certain corporations.
There you go, talking like the founding fathers again.
Because the fact is that our corporations are being accused of what Trump says that other foreign corporations are doing to America. They're coming in and profiting off the people and not giving back enough to the country itself. And some of it should be debated openly, but it's not being debated openly.
Right. And we'll be back after the break. Stay with us.
We're talking to Victor from Precision Diamonds. Victor, where do I go to get
2002 Victorian Avenue in Sparks, 358-6700. Look up the Elbow Room on Facebook at the Elbow Room Bar.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. My name is Brendan Trainor and my co-host Leland Faegre, and on Skype from Seattle, Jennifer Terhune Green. Before we get back to talking about the meat and potatoes of what's going on in the world today,
I'm exhausted.
I'd like to give a shout out to Reno Computer Services. They are one of our sponsors, and they are Reno's premier IT provider, computer repair, malware removal, data recovery. Reno services, IT services, and computer repair is available for you at www.renocomputerservices.com or call them at 775-737-4400 for consistent and secure PC performance. So, Jennifer, we have one good bit of news today, this week, coming from California, of all places, San Diego, which is the more conservative area of California. And that was a federal judge nixed California's ban on large capacity magazines. And it was U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez. And he says because they are commonly used for lawful purposes. And it was a very heartening decision, don't you think?
I do think so. And like you said, it is kind of surprising coming out of California. It's funny to me to call anything over 10 rounds a large capacity magazine.
Right.
But, he makes some good arguments about how this ban would not really stop anybody who's a mass shooter, but it would potentially hinder someone who's trying to use a weapon for self-defense.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, and I really appreciated how he finished his decision. And so I wanted to read this. He said, constitutional rights stand through time, holding fast through the ebb and flow of current controversy. Bad political ideas cannot be stopped by criminalizing bad political speech. Crime waves cannot be broken with warrantless searches and unreasonable seizures. Neither can the government response to a few madmen with guns and ammunition be a law that turns millions of responsible, law-abiding people trying to protect themselves into criminals. I don't know if I've actually heard anything that's so succinct and perfect. He nailed it.
Right.
That's exactly our argument, is that on multiple fronts, that, coming in with big government trying to fix problems is not fixing the problems. It's just punishing all the people who are your law-abiding folks trying to protect themselves and live a good life.
Right. But for every one of those, there's several more that will shut it down. It will
Yeah, and
interdict.
it still has to go to the Ninth Circuit, as I've cautioned here.
Yeah, it's not over.
Yeah, and then
certainly not.
No, but the main point is that he totally rebuffed the argument that banning large capacity magazines would mean that mass shootings would have a pause. In other words, if you only have 10 rounds, after every 10 rounds, a public shooter would have to pause and reload. And so that was the compelling government interest, to make people safer by stopping the mass shooter by giving a pause in the shooting to allow somebody to attack him and possibly disarm him.
Yeah, but the attrition to existing devices would be 50 years before anything like that would benefit culture.
Yeah, but more than that, the judge adroitly pivoted and said that what about the fact that a homeowner who's under attack would have to think twice about how many magazines he's going to carry with him to fight off the bad guys.
Right.
And that couple of seconds in itself could be the pause that enables the shooter to shoot him.
Right, there's your pause.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's absolutely right. That is absolutely right. And plus you're trying to, like he mentioned, remember to grab that extra magazine, plus switch it out correctly under duress, which, is something that people practice because it's really easy to screw up.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and so I love the way he completely demolished the left's argument that way, and affirmed that constitutional rights cannot be broken down into little sub-snips of time, that they have a right has a very expansive ramifications. When you exercise your rights, you're exercising them in a myriad number of ways that can't be quantified and tested and analyzed, whereas the left is constantly trying to do that. They're trying to break down rights and say, well, you don't need to have these large capacity magazines. And as soon as the government starts saying you don't need something, then, the next step is we're going to take that away from you.
Yeah. And this was the Madison-Jefferson discourse on why the Bill of Rights were necessary versus why they were not necessary. The inclusion of a Bill of Rights tends to have the effect of denying existing rights or indigenous rights found in the Constitution. That was Madison's point. Jefferson said they needed to be articulated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so he won the day. But I'm just wondering, we've gone down that road. We have 28 amendments now.
Yeah.
It's just how long do we have to articulate rights?
Well, and that's what the 9th and the 10th Amendment were supposed to solve, that problem. But,
exactly.
But a lot of judges don't want to go that way. I mean, there's two ways of looking at the Constitution, as we have said many times on this show. Either the government is free to do anything that the Constitution doesn't expressly forbid them from doing, or the government can only do those things which the Constitution expressly authorizes them to do.
Right.
And there's a big difference in the way you look at it.
So now, as long as we're in this area of jurisprudence, the Dems have subpoenaed the Mueller report this morning. They voted in a factional vote. And the question now is, are they going to shop around it once Barr refuses to send over the entire report, because he can't by law send them the entire report. It has to be redacted for grand jury testimony and all these other issues. So when he doesn't send them the full report, are they going to shop this around to a judge, and are we going to end up in the Supreme Court?
Well, it seems kind of likely at this point. I mean,
sure
that
does.
would have to be their end game if they're going to say they're going to issue a subpoena like that.
Because they're so desperate, they have nothing else going for them.
Yeah. I mean, Adam...
Well, they have nothing else to talk about. I mean, come on. Let's look at it. What else can they do? They built up this huge argument for 2 years that they were going to nail Trump on this, and
yep.
It came out that, oh, sorry, nothing to see, folks. Move along.
Yep.
They're kind of in a tight spot on this one.
So now they're going to subpoena a report that has nothing in it.
Yeah, it is kind of desperate, like you were saying. Desperate, definitely can see the desperation.
It's designed to drive down his poll numbers and nothing else. But in the meantime, we're stuck in the middle as citizens to listen to this factional back and forth. It's just really, really difficult to watch.
And whether or not it's going to drive Rachel Maddow's ratings in the 2 years coming is another question.
For.
Yeah, they're hoping for it, but whether it's going to actually do that or not. It was amazing the way they pivoted to healthcare on CNN and MSNBC so quickly. Immediately. Yeah. All Nancy Pelosi had to do is say, well, healthcare is going to be the big issue, and suddenly nobody was talking about Russia. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen Mr. Dean lately on CNN.
Which Dean? There's so many of them.
I know. The dean that was involved in Watergate, the one that turned state's evidence against Nixon.
John Dean.
John Dean, yeah. He was on all the shows. I don't see him anymore, and I don't see some of these other players anymore.
Brennan is, I've not seen Brennan. Of course, I don't go over to CNN very often, but I don't see him there. I don't see Clapper.
Right.
Comey made an appearance on CNN yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Comey's made a few appearances, yes.
Do you know that Comey's daughter works for the Southern District of New York? She's an assistant attorney there.
Mm.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
And somebody out of there says that they're not going to be able to pull Trump down with the information that they're investigating there. So that's let them down as well. So first Mueller and now SDNY isn't going to come through for their grand design of toppling Trump.
And it's interesting how Trump turned on Nadler and said Nadler was a longtime enemy of his in New York, but I've beaten him every time.
He is a piece of work too, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's got that one always arching eyebrow. Did you ever notice that?
No, I'll take a look at it next time.
One of his eyebrows always seems to be arching up.
My mom always commented on people's appearances, and I chose not to do that ever. So, but since you've pointed it out, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and of course Adam Schiff is with his Ukrainian backers, and he's in big trouble now too, and he's desperately trying to hang on and find some kind of thread that he can connect to again.
When you compare Joe Biden to Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh, the evidence against Biden is overwhelming compared to what they had against Kavanaugh. Isn't that interesting? And yet there's that's just Joe. Leave him alone. He's just affectionate.
I was thinking the other day that the testimony against Kavanaugh by that creepy porn lawyer's client, that Kavanaugh was somehow the ringleader, and people were frat guys were lining up outside the door waiting for their chance at these women. Mm-hmm. It so reminded me so much of the sex trafficking, where they claim that women have 100 consorts a day, and they're terribly exploited. And I can just imagine some hotel somewhere with guys lined up down the corridor waiting for their 15 minutes of fame.
Of fame in jurisprudence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people just don't seem to catch all that. It's amazing that they don't.
The Delta and Bonanza saloons in Virginia City are simply elegant. Imagine ascending the grand staircase and being surrounded by the Victorian elegance and grandeur.
Or go to lrpnv.com. With a great selection of new and used books, you can get your printing done and a book to entertain you in your time off. And don't forget, you could have your business sponsoring the Bookhound Radio Show, just like Andrew Martoni, author of Little Man in the Map, does every week. Just go to lrpnv.com. That's lrpnv.com or call 775-356-1004. They'll provide solutions for your business and writing projects.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. This is Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. I am your host, Brendan Trainor, along with Leland Faegre, and on Skype from Seattle is Jennifer Terhune Green. And there may not have been under the radar of most people, but it may have been. But in fact, there were elections in the Democratic Republic of Ukraine this week, and it was a preliminary presidential election. There were originally 39 candidates, although some people say Putin was the 40th candidate. But at any rate, there were 39 candidates. 3 of them were up for election. One is Yulia Tymoshenko, and she is somewhat...
she's very good.
Yeah, she is somewhat a darling of the neoliberal women, even some libertarian women. She came to fame, and she was very attractive as a young woman. She wears her hair in a Slavic braid around the crown of her head, and she used to ride motorcycles. But she also used to skim money off of the gas concessions from Russia, and she was twice convicted of corruption and was released at the second after the Maidan by Poroshenko.
Imagine the television commercials for her.
Yes. And she's in her 50s now, but she still looks kind of good. And then there was Poroshenko is the chocolate oligarch. He's one of the Jewish oligarchs in the Ukraine. And Ukraine is a source of beet sugar, a major source of beet sugar, and he's not the first sugar or chocolate oligarch to do things in Ukraine. And he was elected president after our guy, Yatsenko, who Victoria Nuland said was our guy for the transition.
Uh-huh.
And he's been, under him, the Ukrainian economy has crumbled. The average wage in the Ukraine is now $310 a month. There are gas shortages because they've been when the pipeline went through Ukraine, they often siphoned off a lot of the gas and sold it themselves to Poland.
Oh, I find that hard to believe.
Yeah. And so Ukraine is undergoing a drain. Those who are not voting, they're voting with their feet. And there's over 1 million, probably 500,000 former Ukrainians in Poland and over 2 million in Russia. In this election, the Ukrainian government would not allow these expat Ukrainians, even if they were still Ukrainian citizens, from voting in the embassies in Russia. So those people lost their franchise. Poroshenko came in second, but the winner was actually a comedian. And,
there was a bunch of humor in what you've already said, so I'm not surprised by this.
Yeah, and I don't have his name.
Yeah, I don't have his name either.
I think
but
it's Zelensky.
I did see him. But apparently he's not just a comedian. He has a television program. He's a fixture.
Yes.
In the media there.
Yeah, and he has an oligarch sponsor, Koromatsky, who owns about 8 TV stations in the Ukraine. And he's an unknown entity. Some people are saying he's another Trumpian populist because he has no political experience. He arose out of the media, just like Trump did. But whether he's going to be against the New World Order and to what degree, nobody really knows. He says he wants to normalize relations with Russia, at least somewhat. But whether if he does withstand the election, and everybody is figuring that Poroshenko is going to throw the kitchen sink at him and is going to try dirty tricks, like he put the military in charge of the election, the ballot areas, the election centers.
Like Clinton did to Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
Same
He's going to try to do
whatever he can. Is he going to put spies in his campaign? Is that the deal?
Yeah. But most people think that the difference is over 10 points and that the most that dirty tricks can get Poroshenko is 5 points, and so he's probably going to win.
But they said that about Clinton.
Yes. Well, they said, yeah, of course, Clinton was definitely going to win. It wasn't probable.
Yeah. There's no way to 270.
You're right.
There was a way to 306, but there wasn't a way to 270. A lot of people forget that.
So it's interesting because our somewhat undeclared candidate, Joe Biden, also has ties to the Ukraine that are not much talked about.
Back to Joe.
Yeah. And so a year ago, he was present at a Council of Foreign Relations meeting.
Oh, it was a CFR meeting?
Yeah, it was a
I didn't know
CFR
that.
meeting.
Interesting, yeah.
In which he bragged that he threatened to withhold $1 billion in aid if the Ukrainian government did not stop a corruption investigation into the gas company that he installed his son
on a corporate board, wasn't it?
Yes, on the corporate board. Hunter Biden is his son, and but he also has ties to major banking in America, big bank. So he bragged that he told Poroshenko to back off, or he was going to not deliver the aid, and within 6 hours, by God, they did it, and he was bragging about it right there, about the corruption and the imperialism that he's been such a part of, that the U.S. believes it can go around the world telling other countries what to do. So that was interesting, and it may come back to haunt him, although neither party wants to really get involved with the Ukraine anymore.
But he has to be a nominee first.
Yes, yeah.
And I think he's too affectionate to be the nominee. The apparatus, I think Joe should have just recognized it was time to find a beach someplace.
Yes.
I agree with you.
But you see, he felt, I think intuitively or instinctively, he felt like it was his turn because he was denied his turn over several years because of the Clinton dynasty. So he said, it's now or never. And he probably had family telling him it was his time, and so whether he could get the money or not, that's another issue. But he's out there and he's testing the waters. And Trump last night, what did he say about him? How do you like it, Joe?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
It's your turn, Joe. Words to that effect.
So the fissures in the Democratic Party are opening, and they're bleeding a little bit. Even in Chicago, we saw it, where the candidate most tied to the DA, the Chicago DA, and Jesse Smollett lost, but her opponent is not really any different. I mean, they all claim to be a new, bringing in new leadership, but her idea of how to stem the violence in Chicago.
Corruption. She's made corruption an issue.
Yes, yeah.
But then she's got a bunch of city council socialists that were also elected yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really no hope for Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, her idea of curbing the gun violence is the same old, same old. She's going to get together with the police commissioner, and she has friends in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they're going to try to stop the flow of illegal guns.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so where is Kristen Gillibrand when we need her? She should be saying there's no such thing as an illegal gun.
Are you like me? Do you have Gillibrand fever? It's pretty overwhelming. Does she have a sex scandal of her own? Did I just hear that this morning over the last few days or something?
I don't know. It's new to me.
Something brewing there. I'm going to look that up and see if we can bring that into our subjects of discussion here.
Yeah, so again, hope and change is never fulfilled as long as you have these deep operatives in the different regions of government, from the federal to the state and to the big cities like Chicago. I mean, you say Chicago and look up Chicago in the dictionary, and or look up Democratic machine in the dictionary, and Chicago is right there as the main dictionary definition for a Democratic machine. Going back to, of course, JFK and the ballots that were cast to put him over the top in Illinois and in Cook County. So it's got a long, long history, and this new reform candidate is just going to be more of the same. And I think we can pretty much agree on that. And Jesse's what it's showing is again the cracks in the Democratic Party. The Hillary Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, Haim Sabin.
They got nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, they just have absolutely no one and nothing. It's an amazing thing to watch.
Except maybe for Tulsi, if she can get over the top.
Yeah, but that isn't going to happen. And so they're left with who they've got in, the Biden, Bernie, and the subordinates.
Mayor Pete.
Yeah. How do you pronounce his name, by the way?
They're not smart enough. They're really not smart enough to go with the Tulsi Gabbard. I think that actually would be a stroke of genius on their part, but they're not going to.